How would you outline the mistakes in policy that the United States and the West have made, going back even to the Mossadegh era, up through the present time, and how might that instruct us in terms of policy going forward?
We don't have time. I could give a little history lesson here, I think, in terms of all the things that have gone wrong. Some friends of mine have actually collected all of the examples. The history of U.S. Iran relations is simply littered with the corpses of missed opportunities. And it is on all sides. We've made horrible mistakes. They've made horrible mistakes. And it's always been, I like to compare it to a teeter-totter, that when one side is up and the other side is down. And so the side that's up says, I don't need to negotiate, and the other side says, I don't dare negotiate. And then boom, it switches the other way, and the same thing happens with the other, only it's the positions are reversed. Getting to a point of equilibrium is really hard, and on the very few times that it's ever come to that point, one side or the other missed the boat. We are at a point like that right now. So what are the things to avoid? My goodness, they are so numerous. But Iran, for instance, in the early 70s and in the early 80s, really was engaged in an attempt to wipe out their enemies. They had the same way that Mossad went after the Palestinians in Europe, who had been, that they went out for revenge. Iran did the same thing after the revolution, and it went after the people who were involved in that. And so they assassinated people in Europe. Very bad idea. And it was a horrible period in Iran's history. But at the same time that was going on, we were supporting Saddam Hussein, who was using chemical weapons at an incredible rate. And one of the things that was interesting about Obama's speech today, he mentioned the Holocaust, but in the same breath mentioned the use of chemical weapons against Iran in the Iran-Iraq War. Now that was a telling point, because Iran lost about 20,000 dead immediately on the battlefield and maybe 100,000 casualties. And those people are still in hospitals in Iran, and they're still dying, and they can't breathe, and it's really, really bad. Iran knows more about chemical weapons than any other country in the world. And their hospitals are full of people. And so anybody who wants to study the effects of chemical weapons, Iran is where they go, because that's where the casualties exist. So I thought the president made it very clear that we understand that the past has not been a pretty event. President Khatami, when he was the president of Iran, went through the same kind of litany about the hostage crisis and other things, saying, let's face it, the hostage crisis was the first fully televised foreign policy crisis in history. And many of you here can remember it. My students are getting to the point where they can't remember it anymore. But this was a crisis that was piped into people's living rooms night after night after night for 444 days, and the image was bearded, fanatic Iranians waving their fist and shouting death to America. That has an effect. And that brand, that image that was created by Iran in that period has persisted to this day and has a tremendous amount to do with our own domestic politics. Nobody likes Iranians. They all fear and hate Iranians just because of the image that has been created. And it's difficult because not only does Rouhani have to fight the 8 years of catastrophe that were his predecessor's existence. I mean, Ahmadinejad was a disaster for everybody, except for the people, the real hardliners on both sides. They loved him. But other than that, he was a disaster. He was a disaster for Iran. He was a disaster for international politics. He was a disaster for the Middle East as a whole. Rouhani was left with that hole that Ahmadinejad had dug, and he's got to work his way out of it. He's also left with the legacy of things like the hostage crisis and other events, which are not forgotten. They live on even in our genes. They're there. They're part of our body politic. And so getting out of that is a tough road to hoe. And so people are right to say, okay, show me the beef. You're talking a nice talk. Show me what you really want to do. And we aren't at that point yet. We're getting close.
The ironic corollary, of course, is that it's been documented that among all the countries of the region, the view of America is much warmer in Iran than any other, certainly any other country. One commentator actually said, including Israel. Now, whether that's true, I'm not quite sure.
Actually,
It's probably true.
according to the polls, that's really true.
Yeah.